I'm not on it.
Swinging around.
It's okay.
He was a very good method actor.
All right, it's Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. It is 5 p.m. on this lovely Tuesday, soon to be evening for our regular board meeting of Santa Cruz Valley Unified School District number 35. With that said, would we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And would Ms. Vasquez lead us again, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Mr. Brad Beach. Ms. Susan Fobian.
Here.
Ms. Lourdes Vasquez. Mr. Rene Ramirez.
Here.
And myself, Joel Kramer. All 5 members are present. We do have a quorum. Item or subject B is adoption of the agenda. Mr. Verdugo.
Please request to move item 17 from the consent agenda. I would not receive the memo for that. Get back at another time.
All right. So with that said, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as Mr. Verdugo stated, removing number 17?
No moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. All right. Call to the public. No calls to the public. Very good. Move on to number 2, is our presentations. Mr. Verdugo, Superintendent's report.
Thank you. Just wanted to share a few items. Attended the Santa Cruz County Government Relations meeting with the chamber. And we were able to have Mr. Moreno from the high school present on our CT programs. He did a very nice job. So I want to congratulate him and thank him. And Ms. Cavetta was also in attendance with me there. We're able to share about our district and very interesting on some of the future items that may be coming to our county with water. I know you have very interest in water and some possibility of partnerships with Canada, which owns a majority of the water companies in the US, which I did not know. So it was a very interesting meeting to hear all those things. So as being part of the chamber, we get to hear and access a lot of those things that not only affect us locally, but nationally and internationally. So it was a great opportunity. Also want to thank Dr. Linderville for hosting the Southern Arizona Emergency Response Consortium today at Rio Rico High School. It was outstanding. Unfortunately, I didn't make it over, but I wanted to thank her and the team for putting that together. Also want to thank the Rio Rico High School administration team for not only attending AZ Alice, which we had a team there from the district, from Calabasas, and Ms. Andrea from Donald as well. But the Rio Rico High School team presented and represented our district very well. They had the other than the general sessions, they had the highest attendance of all of the breakout sessions, because you could see they had an app that you could see who attended what. And all the others were averaging around 8 to 18, I think was highest, but they had over 50 people attend their session, which was the highest attended session of the entire conference, other than the general session. So I want to congratulate them for doing that. Also want to congratulate the fall sports for all of their work. We had cross country at state as well, and Jorge Trujillo dropped to 3rd this year from his runner-up last year, but I know that every year it's tough to compete in cross country, the new members and things like that. So congratulations to him and the rest of the team. And also all of the other sports, including football. Yeah, we made a large investment in football this year. And we saw a lot of improvement with the team. They were 3 touchdowns away from being 7-3 this year, which, you know, every inch in sports matters. But I know they were disappointed in finishing 4-6, but when you haven't won a game in 2 years, it was definitely a large improvement. So congratulations to them, and getting a lot of positive things happening within the district. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Subject B, governing board member report, Ms. Fobian.
I really want to applaud the sites for the good work on social media. It is so nice to be flipping through Facebook and see the different sites and the things that are going on. It just matters to everybody, not just me. I mean, people really get the feel for what your site is doing and what kind of projects you have. And I'll mispronounce it. Daniel Navarre.
Navarez. Daniel Navarez.
Who's Lourdes's special student, but how great to see him written up in the paper and what a super achievement that he's going to be running in the Boston Marathon. It's so nice. Yeah, it's so nice to see our graduates even go on and do things that are newsworthy. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ramirez.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Well, first I want to report that I saw something, this one, get this negative one out of the way, but there's something that I think everybody should be aware of, and that recently, I think it was in Nogales, they discovered Java, which is a drug that it's a mix of meth and caffeine, something. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. It's kind of alarming. People couldn't believe, law enforcement couldn't believe how quick it got here. So perhaps that's something that all our principals should be aware of. On a positive note, I'd like to thank Nichols for all their contributions. Seems like they're always on our agenda for some kind of contribution or another. So I want to thank them for all that they do for our schools. And I also want to thank my buddy here, Mr. Brad Beach, for all that he does for wrestling. He's on our agenda for volunteering. Your efforts are incommensurable, my friend. So thank you for all that you do. And speaking of thanks, it's the only opportunity I think I'll have before it comes. So I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And I hope you get to enjoy your friends and family as much as I do. And God bless you all. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Lourdes Vasquez.
Okay, I just wanted to, I was part of I went to the Southern Arizona school safety preparation, and I thought it was very informative. It was very, it was really well. We had, sessions that we had to move around and stuff, and kudos to Ms. Launderville. She did a really good job. Mr. What's his name? Mr. Andrade, I think he's here. I thank him also. I also wanted to thank the culinary kids. They did an amazing job with the food. Okay, they really, really did. They went above and beyond. They're really, really good. So I wanted to thank them too. And also wanted to, I don't know if everybody knows, but I know that some of our kids are going to play baseball across the line. Okay, and they were playing, and there was this really huge tournament. Anyway, we got 4th place. Okay, and these kids, I mean, they played their hearts out. So it was, I mean, I really enjoyed that. So kudos to that. And again, happy holidays to everybody.
All right, thank you. Reach.
Pretty much everything's been said, but like Mr. Verdugo, fall sports, good job. Everybody competed well, represented Rio Rico High School in an excellent manner. Upcoming teams moving forward, good luck on their season. And yeah, just enjoy family, friends around the Thanksgiving time, and that little 4-day breather will, I don't know if you have to cook, it's gonna be, but yeah, it should be a nice relaxing 4 days and stuff your face and have some fun.
But some of us relax when we cook.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, certainly, congratulations to all the full sports teams. Certainly it was nice to see that. I think we chatted. I think we predicted 5 and 5. We were saying that, but 4 and 6 is still pretty good. I think you remember when we first talked about that. So that was still good. And it's always nice to, again, I look forward to now with the winter sports, certainly the streaming and putting it on, watching it at my home, watching the game. It's really nice. And the fact is that I think we figured it out. There's no more glitches and it's all great. And so it was really nice watching a football game on Friday or Thursday night, actually. So it was good. Certainly it's nice to see what the state is following through. They've already done already out front right now. We're coming along the interstate. That's our high-speed internet, with the internet coming down. So that will be good for us as well. That's part of what I think Governor Ducey's plan to bring in the high-speed internet. Eventually that will hit our schools and our community, and that's one good thing. Certainly the Yes, with Nichols, I was having to stop by and the Halloween or before Halloween with a car rally, and it was good to see all of our clubs there doing that, and along with Rio Rico Rotary, and I certainly glad that Mr. Fanning is the president. And Mr. Fanning, are you here, sir? No, you're not. Well, nevertheless, I always try to purchase at least $20 when I can for tickets, and I will challenge all the board members to hopefully you do the same as I do. Although John said he buys $50 every time, so I said, I won't compete with you, John, but you're president, you lead by example, which is good, certainly. But they're always usually at Nichols the first, I don't know when they end of the month or end of the month, which is really nice. Thank you for the discipline reports. Obviously, we don't like to see any discipline reports, but the fact that you continue staying on top of your students and holding them accountable as we had chatted, that's very important. Let's see, what else do I have on here? I think that's about it. Yes, and that's good. All right, thank you. All right, item 3, information, discussion, action. Put it to Mr. Verdugo first.
Thank you. Just have one item that wanted to request from the board. If we can move the January 3rd organizational meeting to January 10th, and then we would combine that or move the regular meeting to January 17th. So I wanted to give that 2 options, but my recommendation would be the organizational meeting on the 10th and then the regular meeting on the 17th. Because January 3rd, when we adjusted the calendar, we will still be off. And I would rather not have employees come in on their time off during that January 3rd week. Yes, I need a motion.
Yeah, but I was gonna say.
Oh, and then the other, we have our next board meeting is December 20th, and then our ASBA ASA conference on the 14th. And we did notify each of the members who will be attending. So I think Tuesday, Ms. Vasquez will be attending, and Mr. Kramer will be attending for a new member orientation, which is on the 14th, and then the rest of the board members are scheduled to attend that Wednesday. So,
All right,
It also gives 2 board members a chance not to have to come in during the break.
yes.
3 board members, all no. Right, retired. All right, so we got 2 action items, correct? We got the first item is move the governing board organizational meeting to January 10th, 2023. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor, please acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. The second one is move the regular governing board meeting to January 17th, 2023. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second? A motion and a second. All those in favor, please acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. All right, we got those 2 action items. Now we go back to proposed and prioritize topics and possible dates and times for future board meetings. We got that, but we do have any, Ms. Vasquez, do you have any topics you would like to propose for upcoming board meetings? No? Okay. Ovian?
I know it's early, but I am going to be anxious to hear how the personalized learning is doing. Whenever there's a report of it.
All right.
We will be discussing some of it tonight.
Mr. Ramirez.
Yes, I keep asking for this one. I'd like to know what's up with our high school newspaper, and generally getting news out. What are we doing to continue to make that happen?
Would you like a presentation from communications or from the high school? We do have extensive our newsletter that goes out.
Communications too general, too big.
No, from our district communication specialist.
The high school.
The
I
high
think
school.
that'd be good enough.
Of what?
I like to see us get one of these, something that we can physically actually hold and open, so the kids can see. That's what I really would like.
Old school.
We haven't had that for a long, long time. And there's a good reason for it too.
High school newspaper.
Cost.
All right.
We can add it to.
And
Newspaper.
I also would like to get a status on Chromebooks and future replacements.
the number of our inventory that we have?
Yes, because from what I understand, these things expire after a certain amount of time, right?
So you want to see the IT plan?
Yes, sir.
That'll be part of the IT updates.
Yeah. We have that. Yep.
All right,
I have nothing.
I think. All right, I got something that. I'll just say that we're gonna put it as a future topic, Mr. Verdugo and I were talking about this. That we're with what he was saying in relative to what's transpiring in Rio Rico. And every positive thing that's transpiring as far as business and other thing to that. Maybe not for December, but certainly for January, we'll look at, or maybe December, so that gives us some time to think about it. And all of us as board members can create a board committee regarding how that committee is part of the community, but is attending the, I don't want to say attending, it's getting more information regarding what's transpiring with what our goals are in Rio Rico, what's going on with the possible business with the water and everything to that effect. Because I think we need more input from community members, business members of that committee. So it's just, again, it's just right now, just kind of, we talk a little bit about it. Granted, I'll get a better idea to it, think about it. I'm not gonna just throw it out there like that, but that's how I'm throwing it out right now. Gosh, what else did I talk about with you? That's one. Two is, remember? I don't remember. Doesn't matter, we can bring it up, but then I can just, yeah, there was something to the lines of, gosh, oh. If I think about it later, I will.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, it was something about the policy, but we're gonna do that part of it that she recommended in January, right?
Yeah.
Or something, yes, but that's good, yes. Just conversations that we and Mr. Verdugo and I have that I just want to share too. For obviously that, you know. All right, consent agenda. So any matter of the consent agenda will be removed from the consent agenda discussed as a regular agenda item upon the request of any board member. Are there any requests to remove any of these lists of 49? No? All right, going once, going twice. All right. So then do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as is, with of course the one that's 17 that was removed?
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. All right, motion passes. Very good. All right, well, item number 5, we now are moving on to the study session, the state assessment results, school letter grades, and SIOP discussion.
Thank you. So again, this is discussion letter grades that were just recently released, as well as test scores and our IAP, our action plans for each school site. You have a lot of information, and I know that in discussing with Kramer that we'd like to keep it to an hour, so we'll try to keep it timely, but we also don't want to squash any conversation. We want to make sure that we have that conversation, so we try to keep it to an hour. So we'll go ahead and move forward.
See, I'm trying to save you principles. You don't have to talk as much. Again. Huh?
Oh, looking out.
Right? I know what.
Well, did you do that one? Did you rock and roll?
They would like you to sit on that section over there so that you can be on camera.
No name check.
I think just give you the. We just have your packet so that. You can sit wherever you'd like.
Okay.
Because that's how.
You can sit wherever you'd like.
No voy a sentar allá con la Claudia.
We just have the presentation for you so that you have a.
Right here.
You good right there?
Off camera. It's a good spot. You look directly in their faces.
Give us a stare down.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, President and members of the board for giving us an hour tonight to share with you the work that's been done already. We've heard about our cycle. It's a year-long process. And I won't repeat what exactly that is, but you get into the work and the idea of the Leadership Academy and the SIOP plans are developed. Unfortunately, the data comes in. We've been a lot of time analyzing that. And tonight we're going to show you what we call our SIOP, which is our in our site integrated action plan. And that ties right into the grants, which has to be uploaded to the State Department. I also want to let you know before we start with the TLA team. Mr. Plumbo could be, or he's teaching a 501 class tonight for professional, and he's also had to go to a team that he's coaching at the high school. Ms. Kennedy welcomed a new grandchild into the world literally a few hours ago. And Ms. Padilla, both Ms. Kennedy's online, and Ms. Padilla is also online. She had a family illness and wanted to be here in person, but they're both available to help participate, just so. So we had some questions. The first thing we're just going to do is, one more thing before we start. You want to see the packet, you saw there's lots and lots of slides with data. We're not gonna, the intent tonight is not to go slide by slide, line by line. That would take way more than an hour. We want to get to the discussion part. So if it feels like I'm chunking those slides very quickly, we can always pause and answer questions at the end of each section. I don't want you to think that I was just trying to blaze through those slides. We want to summarize what we saw in the data and then show the principal's action steps that they're implementing to address that. Okay, so feel free to help guide me with the basic. So in terms of the letter grades, the K letter grades are assigned according to the following pie chart. You can see 50% of the based on growth, with other slices of the pie being proficiency, EL classification, and then acceleration and readiness. If you're not, I think the first three are somewhat self-explanatory. Acceleration readiness with a combination of a few different points. It on one hand addresses the number of students that are rated as highly proficient on the state assessment in 8th grade math. They look very specifically at 8th grade math, and you get a certain number of points for the students that are accelerated, if you will. The idea of readiness comes into play in terms of how are we doing at preparing our students to be ready for the next grade level. So readiness looks at minimizing the number of minimally proficient students in 3rd grade English and math. We want as few students as possible in the lowest category. It also looks at their chronic absenteeism rates. We all know that we've been having rate absenteeism for a lot of years, so we get points on readiness if you have a low chronic absenteeism rate. And then also subgroups performance. We'll look at within your math and language, how is this subgroup doing? Hispanics, Polish, et cetera. So all of those total 10% of those little pockets, which they call acceleration and readiness, which is different than growth, which measures your ability to close the gap. So you may be not yet proficient, but if you close the gap and got closer to proficient, you'll get points for that. So that's a quick definition of what those categories mean. We have to show you what each of the types receives and how those points are calculated. I think you probably already know. San Gaetano was an A, and our other 4 schools were all rated as a B. You can see here the breakdown. For San Gaetano, 14.8 for proficiency, 100% of the available points for growth, which is 50 out of 50. Then 9 out of 10 for EL and another perfect 10 out of 10 on the acceleration readiness score. So that's how the layout is. And then there are certain other bonus points that schools can earn as well. So like credit, and how you can beef up your score there. The other schools were rated with the following. Again, I'm not going to go through these. You already had them in advance, so you will come back and address these with the principals, but you can see their Mountain View score was a B. A very high B, actually. They were really just a few points away from the A. Calabasas was a B, 72, and Honolulu also 72, the total 15. And that's a J8 version. The 912 I, if you will, I have a few different slices. Proficiency, growth, and EL, the classification are still the same. But rather than acceleration readiness, they look at the college and career readiness index, which is sort of the top of that pyramid of getting our kids ready for either college or a career. And then they also have an additional slice called graduation, I think fairly self-explanatory. So the high school's letter grade was calculated in the following manner. And you can see they also ended up with a letter grade of a B. Yes.
For those that are watching, when you have a percentage earned of a 66%. And the letter grade is of a B. Can you equivalent that to how it's formulated so they can understand that 66% earned in anywhere else would be a what? Letter grade would be
A B,
right.
former system.
So, but you look, it's at, with the bonus points, it's 72.
Okay, right.
Which is, yeah.
72% in a regular grade would be a fleet.
So yeah, so the percentages of our standard 90, 80, 70, 60 are a very different scale, I think is what you're.
That's what, yes, that's what I'm
A
trying.
very different scale than this is, right?
So anything 80% and above is an A.
It's, I don't know, Hector, do you remember the exact cutoff? It's in the 80. 84%, yeah. So an 84 would be a B in a traditional grading system, I think is your point. In this 84 and above would be considered an A. A B is, I want to say 70 to 84.
Or 83.
Okay. They're bigger than just 10 points.
So what the Arizona State Board of Education does is they do that and then they have a standard deviation. And then what they do with the standard deviation and they set what is called cut score. That's where so that sets what an A is, what a B is, C and so forth. And they do that annually. So at each year, so next year, it may be an 84 is now and above is an A, it may be something different next year. So they review and they set cut scores annually. And so that's,
That would be the Department of Education, correct?
no, it's the State Board of Education.
Board of Education.
It's a state
Council.
Yes, so that State Board of Education reviews that and then they set the cut scores.
So now we'll get into a little bit of the data.
Before we leave that, Mr. Shadow, so if you would go back, so what I want to also share with the board and the community is that obviously we want to celebrate that we were all A and B. I mean, I think that's coming from the pandemic, it's a great to show the growth. But what I want to let the board know, and I already talked to the principals about this, is that, and they can nod their head yes, because unlike previously, I did actually speak with them about it, that they will see possibly a drop next year unless we start to see proficiency increase, because coming from the pandemic, everything had dropped drastically. So you see across not only our county, but across the state, that there was a lot of what we call grade inflation. Because with so much being emphasized with growth, everybody received those growth points. Because if you look at previous scores, we had dropped. So, and again, transparent as we can be, previous grades would have been possibly we would have had some sites that had Ds. But because we're back in person, we know that's our strength as a district, that we have our students learn and grow. they were able to utilize that growth. And so that growth score increased. So almost all of our sites got that full 50 points. So next year, who knows if we'll be able to get that same type of growth. So the goal is to increase proficiency. And so when you have that proficiency increase, it may still add growth, but if growth drops and you increase proficiency, it should balance out. Now, I will also, if you go to CTMS, please. So CTMS, if you look at their percentage earned, they were one of the sites that was consistent. So during the pandemic, their grade would have been the same. It didn't change. So they're an example of what, even though their growth, you can see it was 46.78. That's what we may see with the other sites. And that's the reason I bring their site up, is because their proficiency stability out of that 30% was only 12, but they still stayed a B because their growth dropped a little bit, but hopefully the proficiency will go up. And so they were the one site of all of our sites that stayed consistent with the growth, and it didn't look like they grew as much, but it's because they stayed consistent from one year to the next, as to where the other sites dropped and then had a big surge of growth. So I just wanted to share that as we're looking at the data tonight, that you're not surprised a year from now saying what happened with growth and other things, because we're still hopefully going to grow, but we also want to improve the proficiency. But my guess is across the state next year, all the celebrations that you're seeing now are going to be, why did we drop? Because that growth may not increase again. And I'm not saying that our sites will, because that's the challenge for our sites, is to make sure that we continue to have that growth, but improve proficiency as well.
Do you think that the growth and weight are gonna flip?
The percentage is going to stay the same, but what's going to happen is, because now students may have topped out for a year, they're not going to grow as much, because now they're at a higher grade level. So the expectancy is going to be where now they may be close to proficiency. Now they're going to have to become proficient to actually grow. So right now, the growth score doesn't matter if they're proficient or not. It just is whether they grew or not. And so.
Then wouldn't it reward those schools that are not getting to be with the proficient with their kids? Reward those schools that are getting their kids to be even more proficient?
Yes. Yeah, and that's the goal.
We're hoping.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You hope the weight would flip then.
Yes.
Go back to that, what it used to be 4 years ago.
But there are things that are not calculated in this score too that are coming up. They're standardized tests again, right? Am I
The
correct?
standardized tests are in there.
But we are gonna have more testing and things that haven't been calculated in here as a hangover of COVID.
They're already in there now. So that's where the growth came from. So the previous scores were very low from the pandemic. And so then this year.
That's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that we're still gonna have this hangover. I mean, this is a hangover. You used the word inflated, which I agree with.
Yeah.
And that's a result of this hangover of COVID.
Yeah, but now they're there. So now I don't know if we're gonna see the same amount of growth.
What determines growth, Mr. Verdugo? As far as you got proficient, say I score proficient is 200.
Yeah.
I score a 150. Next year, I score a 180.
That counts as growth.
So it should.
Yeah, but remember, but now they're moving up to another,
Compare.
now they're moving up to a different grade level. So will they be able to move from that 150 to 180? That's the hope.
Yeah.
But the realistic side of it is that you're going to see incremental growth, and it may not close the gap until you reach middle school.
But that incremental growth, isn't it still showing growth?
It should be, but sometimes you'll see, because the rigor increases, that it may be stagnant or they may drop a little bit. And it may be within those very minor percentage points, but if you go from 50 to 149, the rigor is higher and you're still on track, but you dropped. So you're not going to see that growth. So that's the difficult thing. Because that's why these grades were that everybody got to 50%, because during the pandemic, everybody dropped. And I'm not saying it was easy, because moving the needle is always going to be tough to show that growth. But I just wanted to share with the board that, looking at this, why across the state, there was more A's and B's than ever in the history of our grading program. Just because such a high percentage is on growth. And so the challenge is going to be for us, and that's the challenge we talked about, is going to move to proficiency. So hopefully, the higher we get in proficiency, we should still see either level of growth, or even if growth drops, then it should balance out. And that's the hope.
But I would say that.
Now, or can I ask you-
Graded, I mean, if I was doing really well, let's say my second grade was kicking butt, my third grade was kicking butt. This year, they got them to the growth of, they're back up to grade level, right? So next year, you're hoping that they're at that grade level so they can show proficiency. Because then the proficiency weight, if it was reversed, would be throwing that much greater to make that school a higher grade level.
Yeah.
Because what you just said is exactly right. The growth may not be there, but it's on a higher weighted scale. So maybe the letter grades are gonna drop, unfortunately, but if they were proficiency weighted.
Yeah.
And I just hope that's why I asked you on all that.
Yeah.
Because I'm hoping then that the Board of Education looks at that and says, you know what? Maybe they should, okay, we're there. Now go back to the proficiency.
So the cut scores may change again, which they are going to,
Yeah, I would.
likely, they'll change
I would
again.
hope,
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing well as a school.
Yeah, so it might be higher than an 84 to get an A next year. Is that's, and so.
This
so you
was
may-
like a dead cat bounce.
Here's the dick. Yes, yeah. But also wanted to share with you how we're already addressing, which we're going to see through the IAPs. And I know there was a question about personalized learning, but as we move to standards based, that's going to be an essential piece for us as well. Because when you move to standards based, now you don't have grade inflation. So because you know what a 4 is, what a 3 is, we can look and say, okay, if we have a student that say gets an A, and we expect them to be proficient, but they end up maybe not being proficient. We've all seen it. I know Ms. Vasquez has seen it in the middle school where she thinks her kid has an A and then, but what are we grading? You know, we're grading that hard work, we're grading that they turned in work, but now with standards base, we're moving to, do they know the standard or not? And so now we'll be able to go back and see on the AZ Merit or the AZM2. Okay, we had this kid that was a 3. Were they proficient on that standard? Or if they were a 2, we hope that they end up being proficient. Or if they're a 3 or a 4 and they weren't proficient, why? Because our rigor wasn't matching, our standard wasn't matching what we should have on the, so now moving away from grades, we're moving ahead of what we're thinking that other places are going to be doing. That's why I want to share that with the board, with the grade inflation, but also how we're addressing it already. I'll let the principals talk about all their other plans, but as a big, broader topic, I just wanted you to know, we're already thinking about it. We've already been thinking about it for years of how we're going to address this, because you know, Ames used to have the blueprint and all this, and you were able to match things. Now it's very difficult to do, but you have those standard bands that we can now look at and say, okay, this is what we're teaching. And are we getting our kids to learn versus are they getting a grade? A letter grade doesn't necessarily represent proficiency. And what are we graded on? Proficiency. So now we're hoping those things balance out.
Did you answer your question about
Not entirely though. Not everything is on proficiency. Yeah, I had a question. Can you go back to the Rio Rico slide for a second? What are the possible points that you could get for graduation rate?
It's a great question, and what I wanted to go into this conversation was, we talked a lot about proficiency and growth, but whether those two are going up and down, it's not a simple seesaw. There's other ways so we can pick up points, so to speak. So to answer your question, graduation rate is worth 10%, but the
Total points are 20, right? We got half.
Right.
Where I am right now, we got 20 points.
Yeah.
So we need to really work on that one.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why. So we do not drop students from our school to send them to a different school. So our graduation rate is a true graduation rate. We had a 91% drop from 95 during the pandemic. So at a different district, they move those kids to a different school and they get a different diploma. So they don't count on the graduation rate. So that's an easy way. If you want us to start dropping students from our high school to get a different diploma, we create
Well,
that
I
alternative.
would
school.
really like to see that. I like to see that
Yeah.
writing.
not just being told that, because I tell you, that score is unacceptable.
I know the principal that used to be there can tell you that that happened.
Well, I'll say this, with that said,
I meet with those kids at.
back when,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Kramer.
I don't know, you were looking at me, so
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the former principal of that
I'll
school.
just say,
Those students.
I'll say this, that yes, it was true in some sorts. But towards my last few years there, even though we were supposed to be getting those students, they were using a different form. That they were getting the graduation rates by moving them into not the alternative school, because we were getting, and you were there when I was last few years, we were getting a lot of young ones. And not those that we're talking about, Mr. Verdugo. So they were able to keep them in a four-year graduation because they were using the charter school. It cost the district money. Cost NUSD money. So they were losing money, but they were keeping the graduation rates high. And I've said that out loud, but it's fine, that's 6 years ago, 5 years ago, but they were getting that because of that.
It's interesting.
They weren't sending their juniors and seniors to the school. They were sending all the freshmen and sophomores, which that school wasn't supposed to be that way, but nevertheless, that's how it certainly kept their four-year graduation rates high.
And I can tell you, I get all those meetings for open enrollment requests and I deny them now. You know, they don't want to go to that school. They want a comprehensive experience. So this year alone, I've denied probably about 19.
And we've
open
had,
enrollment requests because they don't want alternative experience. They want a comprehensive experience. And I'm not accepting them anymore because I tell them, go figure it out with your comprehensive high school.
we had this conversation right when that school started. You were on the board at the time too, Ms. Fobian, when Mr. Rich and the former principal came down actually to visit. We were talking about whether or not to separate it from the high school, but we knew that this was gonna happen with this loss of points. That we said, well, we're gonna keep them in, it'll be part of Rio Rico. We're gonna lose, we're gonna take hits. We probably could be, at that time, Shelley could have probably may even been a B high school those 3 or 4 years if there would have been a separate school with a separate diploma. But we said we're gonna take the hit because exactly what you just said, Mr.
Because the kids deserve it. They deserve.
Well, they wanted that traditional setting and they wanted the traditional. Whereas some kids don't like that traditional, that's why they chose to go an alternative path and certainly that route.
Yeah, and
So
it's,
we knew we were gonna take that hit when was this? 10 years ago when we started this?
Well, and the kids used to get a letter from that site, not in our district, and they would get a letter and it was like, here's your choices. And the kids would come in crying because I want to come to school still and I would need a second chance. So we were their second chance.
And kids used to cry when we did that 20 years ago and sent it out.
I know, but
But then once they got to the alternative school, they.
we had
they
success.
embraced it. We just, yeah, I just want to know the history of it.
and I'm,
If you look at the history, you know, the present.
and it's not an excuse because we've been able to keep it at 95 despite that. So that's so that we had a drop during the pandemic because we had a lot of those kids that were not kept into that program because it's tough. Distance learning with that setting, but also what we do is a little bit different, is those kids can be 9th, 10th graders, go into that program, then come back. And so they're still on the campus, so there's not losing, so it's a hybrid. We also have enrichment as part of that, so it's not just throwing the negative side of that to create this own separate school. And and like I said, we've been able to keep a 95% grade, so we dropped from 95 to 91. So it's not like we're still one of the top in the state with our graduation rate. So it's not like we dropped to a drastic number.
It's the 4-year graduation rate
Improvement. Yeah, so we'd have to go up from 95.
The only way we
Zero.
get points is if we go all the way up to only 5 points left.
Yeah.
You know, and then we have to drop or maintain, I guess, which is the goal. So that's an example of what we said before about, you know, growth, that growth category. If you grow 2 or 3 years in a row, eventually you become proficient. And now what's good news is you calculate as a proficient student, but we just lost you as a growth student because you're no longer in that category. I think this is a very similar example.
And we know that our graduation, we want to be 100%. So that's the thing. We're pushing toward 100%. So hopefully we'll know way to grow other than get to 100%. That's where we want to be. So.
I think Mr. Rivers hit the nail on the head. I mean, he's right. We still need to look at that because it's very important.
Yeah.
It's just that the intangibles and the other parameters of it.
And yeah, But my point is, I don't want to be compared to anybody else.
So,
I don't compare us to anybody else. I compare us to us and kicking everybody else's ass. That's my goal. And I don't care about anything else. I don't want to compare myself. If I want to compare myself, that's mild. I want to compare myself to the very best, and that's 100%.
I'm sorry, I said that D word because I opened up more.
Yes, I apologize. I apologize.
Let's see about the
I apologize,
So,
but I get fired up.
we'll look for, other points that are on the table, and I think this first one coming up is an example. We're gonna be transparent. So in terms of the Azella or ELL. Yeah, I just wanna go through these slides quickly. I do want to point out in this corner right here, the change that the teachers and the principals, of course, have been working with within the the SEI program. So they went from, I'll remember, a 4-hour block. Was a mandated state requirement, and 1920 that changed to a 2-hour block. 21 became a hybrid model. 22 they implemented a new ELP, and now 2023 this year we have a new test. So lots of change at the state level. So those are the moving target for us, right? We saw that already, and here are some of the strong refinements that I think we rate for and Arizona and both peaked in 2020. So that's not a good thing, right? And so our goal is full slide. This is the place we all schools left some points on the table. There were 10 points available for everybody. And we ranged anywhere from 5 to 9. So like I said, that's one way to counterbalance the growth. That's efficiency. That ratio you pointed out, is another way to pick up the points.
This comprises 10%, right? of the score.
Yeah, that's true.
Any other questions about the slides? At the moment, you can always come back. So then I'm gonna flash, so this is the main that you've heard again. We had these AZM and AZM2, we now have the AASA. But this is our bread and butter, if you will, the English and math that most people are really paying attention to. Jump right to our summary. And the findings here, we basically have followed the state time that we looked at in your handout. You can see that we go up, state tends to go up most of the time. When we go down, the state tends to go down most of the time. Not always to the same degree. Sometimes we close that gap. We talk about the gap quite a bit as a district throughout my entire career here. Sometimes that gap widens, but generally speaking, that's one observation. And then, of course, the other observation is that growth has been our strong point. We just spent 10 minutes discussing that. Right? Those are the two main takeaways from the AAS. In terms of AZ side, to the science part. Let me get back there. I'm sorry. Point out right here that this was the first, last spring, was the first year that this was administered as a statewide achievement test. And as of October, we still have not had the state or county results. Took them a while. You can see what our district level results are. And the takeaway here, that none of our sites earned science bonus points. So what does that mean? That means that it's not a part of the pie. There's no wedge in that pie for science, but there's an opportunity to pick up points in the bonus category. There's a few bonus opportunities in each one of them, and that's the area for growth too. I think none of our schools captured. So that's another thing that you can talk about in a few minutes. ACT Aspires, it's now a 9th grade test. I'm a little too fast for my own grade here. 2022 is the first year that this was administered as a statewide achievement test. And here you can see how we did as really high school freshman. And some of the findings here, we established the baseline of any first time test. And the purpose of this test is to compare schools to the state and the country. So take advantage of we chose to take the path we could have, some schools were given a choice a few years back of going down the ACT path or AZM2, and we chose to go this route, which gives us the advantage of not only comparing to Arizona, but seeing how our students step up across the country. And ACT Aspire is the prelude, if you will, to ACT, which is also the college entrance exams. So that's the only reason why we took that. You know, we funded the AP exam for all our students. I'm always trying to provide as many opportunities for that college pathway. Even for some students who maybe don't see that in their own vision just yet, but often, you know, you take the ACT Aspire as a prep and you score in a particular percentile, and all it takes is a teacher or a counselor or someone to pull you aside and say, you know, you got the C student gets in the top 10%. So they can be very inspiring, that's the name. And the key summary for the ACT, the 11th grade level. You can see the proficiency in math has increased since 2020. And the ELA has increased in 2020. If you go all the way back to the high school high, in that chart that we showed, there are how many points that I earned for proficiency. A whole lot of points to be had in the proficiency category, but to their credit, to the high school, they've increased their scores in both the key areas of math and ELA.
I think Mr. Beach, you had a question on that.
No, I'm just trying to catch up.
We got a 12.08 on that. Is that what we got?
You know, on proficiency?
And so also just with this, when we had to make that decision, we knew that the rigor was going to be much higher during the ACT versus the AZ or the M2, but we also made that decision for moving on to higher ed purposes. But also, if you remember, and I shared this last year, that the AIMS used to be a graduation requirement. And once that removed as a graduate requirement, scores drastically dropped because students like, why do I need to take this? Why do I even need to try if I'm not going to utilize it for graduation? So the incentive was to move to the ACT to say, well, you need the ACT if you're going to go to college. And so this is now twofold for us. One of the reasons, or the reasons that we made that decision was to keep it as an incentive, but also allow them, but we knew it's going to be more, we knew that the rigor of the ACT is higher than the AZM2.
Yeah, it was a serious problem. They wouldn't take the exam seriously.
Yeah.
They have lifted the ACT requirement.
In some cases, but it's still a factor for scholarships. As well as some universities use it as an add-on. So say I'm a 2.3 student, but I have a high ACT score. Now it allows me to still get enrolled at a four-year university versus having to go the community college route. So it still is useful, even though many universities are dropping it as a full requirement. It still is one of the add-on criteria. So it gives us, for those kids, it still gives us an opportunity to have that incentive. And of course, we're making the dual enrollment push. You know, that's the other thing with our district, you know. So dual enrollment, now you get that ACT, now it gives you opportunity to get scholarships, because if you have a high dual enrollment GPA, now that and your associate's degree, now that looks like you're coming into a university with a high GPA with college course work, good ACT score. Now that gives you opportunity to get some scholarship money and hopefully fund those last 2 years of your school.
Sorry for getting you off that tangent.
It's okay.
That's a whole nother discussion.
The whole other thing, but it does tie in.
It's needed.
Yeah, it does.
Need to talk about that.
It does tie into this. And that's the other thing that obviously we want to everybody to be an A, always be an A. That's our aspiration. But we also have other things that are well beyond that dictate our success of our schools in our district.
Steve, this comprises 30%, right?
The ACT, yeah.
Efficiency, yes.
And then just the last finding, which I alluded to earlier. So math and ELA increase, science efficiency remains above, but we already stated that's, the weak area.
This is a big whopping chunk, right? I mean,
There are bonus points for science. And in here, it's factored into that 30%. But for the K, it's science, a bonus point. And I guess I have a personal opinion on that. Part of that is the after effects of when the state has ignored science and just the graduation requirement is all around the arts. In order to graduate, schools did the best they could ethically to continue to do science and social studies. Fine arts and everything else, but we have some work to do to dig ourselves out of the district. You can see that he's implemented the curriculum, science curriculum, 5 months ago, so. we're already working. Okay, with that said.
Yeah, I was just wondering, we've got the county data on the first part, and then I'm looking at the ACT Aspire, we got the USA's Rio Rico High School. And do we have county data on this also?
We're the only ones. I
We're
believe.
the only one?
The reason- I think we're the only ones that took it.
Aspire?
I believe so.
Yeah, let's see.
I don't know what.
I can't, we have to verify, but from what I
The
understand.
Aspire is at 9th grade, right? 9th grade, yeah, they took it. I was just wondering, because I saw the county data and then I didn't see it. Yeah,
We can search for that.
Can you add-
Well, I don't think they'll break it down county because it's a state.
yeah.
We guess we probably could, but it's because it's a state benchmark. By us, it's state, national. Would be my guess.
And we can ask them.
Yeah, we can. And I think Meg has her hand up.
Go ahead, Megan.
I think they did the ACT and the Aspire, 9th grade and 11th grade, correct? The ACT,
Yes,
11th graders?
Yes.
yes. So the ACT Aspire is the 9th grade state test, and the ACT is now the 11th grade state test. And they have not yet released county data for those, and they haven't released some of the county and state data for the AZ Sci either.
Okay.
So Megan, who took do you know who countywide, who took ACT Aspire and who took the? ACT?
Everybody, every public school across the state.
Well, then it'll be charters too, correct?
And alternative schools to do.
Well, it's public, but charters. Yeah. That way it throws into the county what you were asking.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. So now to move on to the SIAP portion, which is again our site. Integration Plan. And that is divided up by state requirement to these 6 principles. You can see for yourself what they are. So every principal has a plan. We go through our whole process, which is a very brief reminder, begins with our comprehensive needs assessment, where we survey stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, staff, community members, and whatnot. We talked literally about that this morning with the principal, about getting that process started, because we basically start in December and that runs all the way through April. This red line, if you will, runs through April. So the CNA helps the sites identify, they go through a thing called a root cause analysis, where they try and drill down to the root cause of each of those needs. And in doing so, they identify their 3 primary needs. Then for each of those 3 primary needs, they have to establish a SMART goal. Then for each of those SMART goals, they come up with as many strategies as they feel they need to address that SMART goal. And then within each strategy are the specific action steps. And that's where it was really implemented at the classroom or the school site level. So from the very high survey, what are our biggest needs and so on, all the way down to what are we doing about it in the 3rd grade room 101 tomorrow. That's what that red line sort of represents. And the action step I emphasize there is meant to be action. It's not think about it, but let's do some things, let's try some things, let's innovate, and then we, go through our whole cycle of analyzing whether those action steps really have an impact or not. In terms of resources that we try to provide to this, we call it Leadership Academy, and our process every quarter, we check in with the students to see how they're doing. There are monthly one-to-one meetings with one-to-one between the principal and our grants coordinator to look at their grant funding to make sure that they're utilizing their grant funds as effectively as possible. There's a new tool that we added is the Arizona Personalized Learning Network data dashboard. When we talk about personalized learning in a fuller presentation, we can share a little bit about that with you. But that is basically, again, a survey of our schools from stakeholders that identifies 12 categories: vision, culture, climate, resources, and there's 12 different categories in there. That's extremely data rich. We only began that a few years ago. I think the principals would agree that's been very helpful to help them during that root cause analysis process. And then just the TLA off as a department provides the following things as well to try to help the principals identify the most effective action steps that they can. That process I just explained to you, as we've already, just this year, we've had these three people and have reached out that I'm aware of. We get calls quite often to our district, typically funneled through our superintendent. The superintendent from Aho spoke to me about our professional development model, we call it 301. We're very intrigued, not only about how we're using our 301 dollars, but how are we getting professional development for teachers. I know the superintendent from Holden. I want to speak with Mr. Estrada about how we're using instructional time models at the high school. And he had another phone call on the same topic from the principal at Cibola in Yuma. So I think around the state, we're getting requests to share our ideas and our action steps that we're taking. And that's what we want to hear a little bit more about right now. So our overarching strategies that drive our action steps these are very broad topics. Portrait of a graduate. How do we engage our students through pedagogy, flexible time, and standards-based learning and reporting that we talked about earlier? And then how do we engage our families? So the first one, portrait of a graduate, and you have all these slides in front of you. There are at least three that talk about just these first two. And you can see here's some suggestions or strategies from the high school, the other schools as well. So we're going to stop talking and open up those schools. Talk a little bit. I'm going to intentionally not tell high school. That's the idea. The portrait of a graduate is not for seniors. It begins in preschool. The idea is what's our picture, our portrait of what a graduate looks like, and how do we start working on that at the elementary level. So I apologize, Chris and Mimi, but I'm going to put you on the spot and you can take off your portrait. In fact, Mount View, I see you have a top of the picture.
Sure. Good evening. Mountain View really tried to focus on actionable behaviors when it comes to portrait of a graduate. What does that look like as it matriculates down through the grade levels? Obviously, the goal is graduating from high school, but not just that, beyond. And what does that look like? Are we going to go into kindergartners and talk to them about being ready for 12th grade? No, but we're going to talk about what is necessary for first grade, and then with first graders, what's necessary with second grade, and then have an overarching conversation and narrative that follows them throughout their elementary career about their goals and their goal setting. When we talk about actions over words, we've really going back to our Leadership Academy this year, put an emphasis on what does that look at like from a character standpoint? What does that look like from an academic standpoint? And then what does it look like in terms of just your overall ownership of your own life for the child? So when it comes to character, not just saying the character pledge in the morning, for example, but what actions are you taking? And then we emphasize that by reading what those actions are when they're recognized over the announcements in the morning. Little Susan got recognized for helping clean up the cafeteria without being asked. Thank you for doing that. That demonstrates citizenship, and just really trying to make direct correlations and explanations with those behaviors. When it comes to academics within the classroom, when we're looking through the lens of standards-based learning, redirecting students back to not just did they get it right or did they get it wrong, or I did well or I didn't do well, but giving them specific feedback in terms of what is the skill. Now, we're not going to use academic language all the time necessarily if it's not grade appropriate, but we are going to be specific about the standard of the skill. Bring me your reading. Tell me what you're working on. Show me what you're working on. Why does this matter? Asking those questions so students can begin to demonstrate along a continuum their understanding. And we're starting to see evidence from students. I know we recently had the SBLR focus groups, thank you, with students, and they were able to articulate in their own words what that looked like. Some better than others, but it gave us a good feedback on what that is. And then the final piece is owning their own learning, not just in the classroom, but in their life, taking charge, even of social situations, especially, how do you problem solve? I actually had a student that I've been really trying to focus in on last couple of weeks. I got a message when I was at the consortium today saying, this particular student would like to meet with you at 12:23. He came up to try to make an appointment and I was 12:23. Well, that's when his lunch ended. So he wanted to try to get me and not miss class. And I thought that was a big step for that kid. So that's another way through behavior.
On that note, I'm gonna point to Rebecca, the second bullet here, Rebecca, is about what your SSR classes.
Sure, so SSRs are sustained silent readings. We're really trying to get our students to read for enjoyment, but also that stamina, but also within that time frame of 30 minutes. We have personal plans of progress, so everybody has their individual digital notebook. It is based off of their MAP scores, so where they are, what do they need to improve. We have the draft of the portrait of a graduate and we go through what each of those mean. For example, what does it mean to be ready? What does it mean to have perseverance? And we correlate that both with their academic success. It's okay not to get a 3 when you first start a standard, but you want to progress through there and it takes hard work and dedication. And so we really connect that vocabulary that we have into that the portrait has into what is going to be a successful student. So with our vision, we want them to be responsible, productive, lifelong learners. And it takes more than just getting a 3 in a standard, but what does it mean to continue on? It means that you need to go home and do your homework and you need to make sure that when there's a problem, you don't let it bother you to the point where there's an altercation or anything else that could happen. Let's learn to listen and have these conversations. And so we really focus a lot on where they're at and they can self-evaluate. So once the teacher's able to explain it, and it's at different levels with different students, but they're able to evaluate what they think they're really good at and areas of improvement. And so that self-reflection and evaluation really does help them. And then so on a consistent basis, usually monthly, the teachers meet with the kids, they open up their PPPs, and then they go back and review and what have they improved on and what do they need to improve on, because as it progresses through the school year.
I think that, thank you, I think that touches on the standards-based grading earlier, where typically in the old system, the first week of school, you get an A, second week you get an A, third week you get an A, because that's just the way the grading system worked, right? But now in the first week of school, if you're only at 2, right, that still feels like I did something wrong. When you do anything wrong, but you just haven't demonstrated mastery yet, you're not supposed to. It's only the first week of school, right? So teaching the students that a 2 is fine, it's not a D. But they had the mindset of, I always get A's. And so now I think what we're talking about is that they're taking ownership. The more they understand the system, the more they're able to take ownership.
And that is something that even today we had a conversation. So MAP testing is coming. And we want projected proficiency. So I met with the students and student council today and we talked about what that meant, because they're going to be the voices of their peers. And so I told them and I reminded them, projected proficiency, maybe I'm already at a certain level where all I need to do is grow 2 points and that's my growth. But I might be another student that needs to grow 10 points. And their faces lit up like, oh, okay, so like we don't all, I'm not going to get on the speaker and say, you need to grow 10 points or else. So they're really making those connections. And I really think it is the continuation of the proficiency skills that we have from the 1 to 4, along with the vocabulary and being consistent, and then just making those connections, because we really are focusing on student ownership and agency. And so they really are able to understand, you put it in their terminology and make those connections, and then they really do understand it. And by the time we've left today with my group, they were all on it. Like they could tell me, like I asked them, well, what did we talk about? And they could tell, like, projected proficiency meant everything to them now. So it really isn't about, making sure they're at the 3, it's just where they need to be. So I can see from August when we first introduced it to now in November, like they really are making those gains, and it's that continuation of conversation with them.
The only thing I would say about that though, is that a MAP test is not a grade level test.
No, we understand. Yeah, and they understand that too.
My only criticism of that, because then when they have to take a standardized test, it's just a totally different story. That's a grade level test. And I remember when I was at Calabasas, that thing was just a moving target. It was so hard. It was so hard to figure. I mean, unfortunately, we didn't have the ability to look at stuff, to have some kind of pre-testing that we could give these guys. As you guys know, it was a moving target all the time, but
Isn't that two?
math testing isn't a grade level test.
No, and they're aware that they know that it's at their level, but it's really similar to where they are within their. subject. So one is not on grade level, but they know what they now have to do to move to the next level, or to become more proficient. So the terminology is the same.
And this, you think back to the points that were left on the table. Right? So here's a room full of adults trying to figure out how we're gonna get these students to help us grab these points, right? Well, the points, the kids don't care about. They don't care how many EL points we did or didn't get, right? So I think that the challenge is to help them understand their why is it important for you? And in all due respect, it's not important to get points, it's important that they learn English or learn math. Like that's what's important for us. So helping them understand that why and also the how. You know, I got a B in your class. How do I get an A? Well, that's a very different answer compared to Mr. Beaker's class. But I got a 2 in your class. How do I get a 3? We'll both have the same exact answer for that question. So I'm just trying to tie all the different conversations together. I want to jump a little bit to the elementary, Bethany and Mimi. Also, you're talking, this first one here is having to do San Cayetano, talking about student agency. And I know Calabasas has their WIN notebooks. So can you talk about what student agency looks like at the lower levels?
It is that mindset where our students are really owning their data. And they're tracking, they have their learn binder. I know you guys, it's their win binder, but students are really owning where they're at. They're setting their own academic goals as well as some social emotional goals. But really owning it and wanting to work towards that. And so their teachers are meeting with them, they're having data talks, there's celebrations, or okay, how much further do we need to go? And it's so interesting to see how our students have changed. I know the second learning check, our kindergartners pulled it out and had it on the table. And where are you? And what do you have to work on? And this and that. Or at fine dining, I always ask our students, I stole this from the Rio Rico High School, like what's something we can do better at San Cayetano? And it's different things, typically what I can do. And it's the first time that a student has said, oh, well, I really want to work towards proficiency. I'm still developing. It's like, what? And it just kind of just threw me that they, not only the language, but they were seeing how they themselves could make San Cayetano better. So that was absolutely incredible that they're really owning their place in San Cayetano and their academics and how they can improve it and what they need to do. So that's been a phenomenal shift for us.
And I think too, is that ownership that Mimi has talked about is it's coming through in a variety of ways. So I had a parent meeting the other day and the kid wanted their notebook and to talk about their data. So that student agency is coming through a lot more. And also the opportunity for the kids to own their learning, and then also incorporating the portrait of the graduate in their WIN notebook. It's just all tying together. So you have the standards-based learning, you have the portrait of the graduate, it's all encompassed in this WIN notebook, and they have their set goals. So that correlation is just continuing, and it's really great to see that the kids are starting to use that vocabulary, and it's not all coming from us all the time. The kid was able to run that meeting the other day. It wasn't me, it wasn't the parent, it wasn't the teacher, it was the kid. And we were able to sit there and listen to what the kid had to say.
This is my opinion. We all sort of assume that older students, high school students are the most likely to take ownership of their learning. And we all know that they're often the least interested in taking ownership of their learning, right? So just want to let Hector talk a little bit about what the high school is doing to create student agency.
So part of it is we changed the structure of time, like with the instructional time model and the flexibility that the states gave us with seat time. And so having students decide on having a class for intervention, we make it mandatory, but we build that schedule to where, there were students that didn't show up for the intervention that needed it, right? And then we met with them afterwards and discuss how did that impact you? How did that choice impact your preparedness and your learning? And then we had students that attended the intervention time, right? Because they knew they needed it. And so building the choice and agency within the structure of school has really helped shift that student ownership. In our last intervention week, we went from something like 800 individual Fs that grading period to 303. And that was students just, taking ownership of where they were at and filling in those gaps. I know in the leadership team with our teachers, we talked about how nice that'll be once it's standard based for us, because right now we're still battling traditional grading and intervention time, so with our shift, but that model is helping with that. Another little thing that's helping with student agency is homework, the notion of homework. I have more conversations with kids about homework being practice as opposed to homework being for a grade. That's always a question. And the conversation shifts to, well, you have the option to do your homework for practice, but it's not going to be counted for a grade. So where's the motivation? Right? They're like, well, I'm not motivated to do it because I'm not going to get a grade. And so once we have the conversation about, well, it's about learning, not necessarily about your points. And that's having a small shift with student agency. It's a change for the kids right now.
You mentioned flexible time, and there's a few slides here. I'll let you keep talking a little bit more about this part of the flexible time, Hector.
And so within the structures, we have the Rio Rico Flex program this year that allows students to have that experience of being in person for those classes they really want to have in person, and they learn better in person. And then the opportunity to flex and learning on distance. We have 84 students on the Rio Rico Flex program. Not one schedule is the same. Every schedule was built uniquely based off what the student needed and to meet their needs. Whether that's working, childcare, involved in a ton of things, and so they don't want to give up all of their clubs and stuff they're involved with, so they're taking flex in 0 or 7th period, right? Like, so there's a lot of different needs that we're meeting with the flex program with distance, and so we offer comprehensive high school experience for all of our students, whether they're in credit recovery, SEMA, these flex, and so our distance kids have the opportunity to learn distance remotely, but then still be a comprehensive high school student. And they're making that decision because that's the best for their learning.
So I just want to repeat something that Hector said, that 70 something students on
84 on flex.
schedule. So that, at first blush, that sounds like you got kids going wherever they want, doing whatever they want. But when you explain that they're building what they need, they're building a schedule to help them reach and achieve what they need, that's agency right there. They now know what they need to get, and they can, agency means that you have the resources to do it. The first step is to know what you need. I need a new car, but I don't have the money to get one. So who cares that I know what I need? I can't do it. You get an agency to do that. At the lower levels, obviously, elementary, middle, they don't have the maturity to create their own schedule. So can any of the other principals talk a little bit about, talk about reach?
Sure. So years ago, we started a intervention and enrichment period called REACH, which isn't exactly an acronym, but it's reteach and enrich, meaning reach for more, try to go above and beyond. That's the mindset. That's why it's called REACH. We have expanded that this year with the instructional time model opportunities to have basically REACH weeks where we put pause on new tier 1 learning, and we're able to just focus intensively on reteach and enrichment during the entire week. And we took that from Jumpstart, really, with our incoming kinders and first graders, where the last 2 years we've done a Jumpstart and it's been very successful. So other teachers at other grade levels wanted to expand that. So now we do it. We don't have quarters anymore, but we do it before each break or right after each break, so that we can hopefully kind of stick a pin in that learning loss and bolster their skills as we head into that lull, whether it's winter break, spring break, summer, before and after. And we've done it once now. Well, we did it with the Jumpstart with the K1, but we've done it once with the whole school prior to fall break. And kids seem to enjoy it. It's also an opportunity to do project-based learning, where we're able to do more extensive projects over time, where we're not stuck within the confines of 90 minutes math, 65 minutes reading like we normally would be. And then the other side of that coin is being able to be flexible in what we're doing during the regular school day all the time. So in the past, we've done an hour at the end of each day for our reteach and enrichment period. Well, now giving teachers the option of recognizing what students' needs are at any time of the day. So it could be 9 o'clock in the morning. They can adapt their schedule as often as needed based on student data to do reteach and enrich during that time. We're also trying to really drive the idea of we're teaching standards, not grade levels. So of course we still have grade levels, but we're seeing, especially right now, like 5th and 4th grade, mixed kids during that reteach and enrichment period, where we've got 5th and 4th graders potentially working on the same skills, but appropriate for where they are in their personal learning continuum. Rather than saying, okay, all 5th graders go over here, all 4th graders go over here, really looking at what does the kid need? Let's get these kids and let's get them what they need. And let's find the teachers that are the most skilled in teaching that need and pairing them up with that particular individual. So we're dabbling, I'd say, but we're seeing positive results from students and feedback from teachers as well.
So I think the board may have heard in previous presentations, the idea that when the time and resources are fixed, learning becomes a variable. And we want to say that sentence backwards. We want learning to be fixed. All students will learn state standards at mastery level. So if that's fixed, then that means the time and the resources become variable. So that's where this idea of flexible time comes into play. I'm really appreciative of the principles. A lot of this flowed from the state legislation regarding instructional time models. And in the beginning, the state passed law, but didn't give us any how to implement it. So we, I think, have been one of the leaders, and I don't say that lightly in the state implementing. You can see a number of different strategies that the sites are all trying in regards to flexible time. Does the board have any questions about flexible time for the group before we move on to another?
I would say. I would have to say with the flexible time, they're working. I mean, are they passing their courses? Are they, when they're doing the online portion of it, or is there success with that program?
Both Rebecca and I are parents are you talking about high school?
Well, in
Or just in
general,
general?
it's probably geared towards the high school because they're sort of independent. They're working online. Are we seeing that they're doing the work, or are they goofing off and?
I don't mind sharing Dylan's because my daughter's a flex student. How many absences did she have last year? Way more than she should have. She was going through a ton of things, but she would just leave the high school. Like we would have to figure out where, I'm not proud of that, but that stuff, I think she's had two. Both excused by me. So for all those kids who struggle, and she traditionally has struggled in comparison to her sisters, she's all A's, some B's.
And I can speak both as a parent and just from the site. So as a parent, Bella, my daughter at the high school level, she's into just about everything and likes to have 20 things on her plate. So she does take a math class online. And it allows her, she dedicates herself on Sunday to get caught up. So the flexibility is very helpful for that. At the high school level, knowing that they have more on their plate, whether it's an activity or they have to have a job or whatever the case may be. At the middle school level, we do the flexible Fridays and we incorporate Win Wednesdays, what you need Wednesdays. And it's turning into more than that. It's just, I wanted to give the teachers so they didn't have too much that it felt overwhelming. But I can tell you both at the teacher's perspective and the student's perspective, teachers are embracing it more and more because with standards-based grading, so they're at a 1, our expectation is the 3, or that's what the goal is, 3 or higher, right? So it does give that flexible time for them to meet with the kids that might not be there, along with their pathways that they have. I just did an observation of a 6th grade science teacher, and she asked me to come in to observe her. with this is what she's doing. Am I doing it right? Is it the way? And so like she had her checklist and kids were all over the place. Some could take an assessment, some were getting one-on-one, some were listening to a pre-recorded, some were looking at the slides. And so she was able to hit all of those students and get them where they needed. So I can say, like, as we look through the data, progressing, they are wanting to get more of the proficiency because they're not seeing it as a punishment any longer. Like, "Ugh, I didn't do my work, well, I might as well not do the 5 assignments." So they are having that extra time, and like we put everything on our Google Classroom. So the kids have links, they can go back and review it, ask the questions. So it is very fluid, where you kind of think on your way home or before, and then you forget about it because you get busy. And so it does seem to be very fluid between the students and the teacher, and it is that increase of proficiency. I'm excited, honestly, for the math test. I know it's not by the standard, but I want to see their growth, and the students want to see their growth and having the conversations. They know what they have to do. Well, my teacher allows me to do retakes. I can go back and try it again because I didn't understand it the first time. And that's the whole point as we roll out this standards-based system.
And in addition, just wanted to clarify a couple of things that are going to be growing from the instructional time model. Is internships and partnerships with business and community, because now a high school student can take their math class and then be an apprentice with one of the businesses and still count that as their math class, because they're taking it from the classroom to the application piece. And so those are the things that still need to grow, because we have to work with the businesses, the engineering groups, things that, those are just examples. I mean, it can be in a lot of different things. It can be, from BLA business, they can now go actually be working a business, and not just on the cashier side, but look what they're doing for the financials and things like that. So those are things that will be growing from the instructional time model. And then previous meeting, what was one of the things that the board wanted to make sure we were doing? Lower class sizes. So how do we get creative in lower class sizes? We have those students that are on track. Now they can do an active engagement at home or somewhere that are on campus. Now you have a 1 to 12 versus the 1 to 28. So we may not see the immediate right now how it's working, but those are things that are going to continue to grow and be able to utilize that instructional time model, because now it allows us to be as creative as we want to be, to make sure we're meeting that personalized learning piece, but also utilize the community, utilize class size. So it's meeting a lot of different things that probably weren't intended at the beginning, but now we can see that they're part of how we can make this work for us.
Yeah, because I know on the Flex, they're using online model with Ingenuity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just looking towards the future, and whether it's working or not, whether they're mastering the standards, but I guess we could do the Flex students in certain classes when they take the test and see how well they're doing, and hold them accountable.
Well, they'll still take the data assessments, right? So we'll still have.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about kids, my son was probably the first Flex student that we ever had in the district, because we used him as a guinea pig, just to be honest. And so he was online taking high school classes while he was in middle school, because he didn't want to move to the high school level yet. But he still took the assessments in middle school. So he got 100% on the math assessment while he was doing it online. So, and he was going into the classroom when he needed to get additional help and things like that. So it does work for certain students, and that's the thing, but it's that personalized learning piece, that whatever works for our students to be successful is what we're going to do. So if it's not working, then now you're back in the traditional mode.
Right.
And it does help with the low students. We have distance learners at the middle school as well, and they needed to stay home for some reason or another. But we've had students that are not at grade level, so we can use that data and then tailor their program. So, and they do, honestly, they can do it a little bit quicker. So it builds those skills and we don't have those gaps. So instead of creating a bigger gap, we're trying to close that gap so that they can so they still have to do their grade level, but we can also give them those additional, so that it's filling in those gaps. Because if they're very frustrated at the grade level because they're not proficient, what are we going to do to help them? So we have a person that is on all the time with either GoGuardian or Google Meets, and they can walk them through those and then also progress them where they need to be. So it's pretty impressive in this day and age that we can service our students, even if they, for some reason or another, they can't be on campus with us.
Some students had to take German when the German teacher left.
But you know, the other thing.
Yeah, flex scheduling.
Schedule, but you're also, when you're talking about like the Germany trip, you know, that could actually count as instructional time if you do it during the school year. You know, those, because field trips can now be counted as part of your instructional time.
It's not a field trip, okay, they
Yeah.
attend school.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you know, if they're doing their enrichment activities, that's count as part of.
Looking to spend some more money though, Mr. Verdugo. I just thought of something. We continue doing that, what we're doing about the flex scheduling, you said in the end, which we've talked about and it's great. But then we're gonna have to look at all those students that do not have transportation, how we're gonna provide transportation for them.
Which we already.
But I mean, once we get bigger and better, we're gonna need more.
Yeah.
In the budget, we're gonna need more bands.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 topics left. Those probably take 10 to 15 minutes, but it's up to.
You're on 10 minutes, you're on 67 minutes, keep going, you got 10 minutes.
Did you have a question about what we talked about?
No, go ahead and then we can come back.
Ramirez may have a question.
No, I'll do the same.
Okay. So our remaining 2 topics, we already sort of touched on these, and hopefully you can see the interconnectedness of everything. So engaging students via story for study and important. And you got a few slides that I'm just going to, you have the hard copies of course in front of you. So those 2 slides, I'll put them. A big challenge this year, especially at K-8, well, in the K board, it's helping students and families. I know we've had that discussion in the board too, is a concern that the family's aware that they know what's coming and so on. And then of course, high school is trying to be proactive and piloting in certain areas strategically where they can to help prepare students for what will happen a year from now. Want to talk about how that process is going based on these 2 slides?
I'll start. I'm gonna start off with a story. First we have conferences, family conferences come along, student led. We have our WIN notebooks that they use to guide themselves for the conference. And the internet goes down. And some of the notebooks are actually digital. So 5th grade and upper, or the 4th grade and up to here are all digital notebooks, and then the lower grade levels are paper. So the paper, they're fine. What do you do when you don't have internet and on Google? So it was really awesome because I walked around trying to hand out some hot spots to some of the staff members, and they're like, we're good. We have data walls that correlate with our WIN notebooks. We have all of these other systems in place that it's okay. We don't have to have the WIN notebook to show the proficiency skills because they're displayed all over our classroom. And the students are the ones who own it. So they could go over to that particular area in their classroom and say, here's where I'm at with my reading. Here's where I'm at with this specific standard that I'm focusing on right now. And so it was a relief for me because of course I'm stressing out, but the opportunity for the students to have those proficiency skills displayed around the classroom, and the families being able to see it on the walls and that the kids are understanding it and can explain it. The opportunities for at site council, Meg's done a great job too with the videos that she's created, English and Spanish. I push them out at site council every chance I can to get the families to try and understand, because it is a whole new growth mindset. I had some parents that had a little bit of a difficult time, but once you sit down and tell them, you're really trying to look at that specific standard and assess them versus they just got a letter grade on an A and it's not showcasing what they really know. They're like, okay, yeah, it does make sense. It's not the way that we grew up anymore, and they are appreciating that shift. So that proficiency scale and the personalized learning, the kids being able to pinpoint where they're at and what they need to do, having some voice and choice has really changed, and the students are appreciating it more and more, that they're having the opportunity to showcase it. And that conference time was a really good eye-opening experience to see, are they truly understanding what's happening?
And I think with the students, just real quick, with the proficiency scales, they're understanding what it is they need in order to be successful at that level, as opposed to what does an A really mean? What does a B? It can be different. But they know at the proficiency scale. So with every standard, we have them labeled with what you should be able to do at that level, and then it progresses up. And so the students are able to see that. Teachers have it posted digitally and a lot of times on their boards as well. And so they can see exactly what they need to do. And it's no longer the teacher gave me a C. It's, this is what I was able to do and this is where my level is. Now what's the next step to get to the next level? So I think that's like the biggest switch, and that's where the student engagement is, because it's no longer the teacher. They're now saying, you know, these are the things that I need to do to get to the next level, and they can distinctly explain what level they're at because of what we've put into place with the proficiency skills.
And they'll know, they'll be like, I'm definitely a 2 right now. Like, you could do that as a closure activity. I've seen so many teachers use that. Based on what our learning target was today, where do you feel like you are? And they are brutally honest on where they're at. I'm a 3. And some of them, they're like, out of 1, and that's okay.
The focus has definitely shifted to the evidence of their learning. And it's so fun to see it from kindergarten to 5th grade. Our teachers are so creative and how to explain proficiency skill. So in kindergarten, 3-star writing, shooting for 3 stars. 3 stars, there's spaces between the words, capital letters, and they really understand it, and they can look at it and say, oh yeah, I'm a 2. And they know exactly what they need to go back on to get those 3 stars. So it's really, it really is great to see that shift and that they understand I have to show my learning. And so it's really positive. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's incredible the shifts that have occurred just now, and really knowing that they're working towards the whole year to be proficient in those standards. So it's really okay that you're developing. I know we said that before, but really looking at the goal is to be proficient in these standards for the end of the year. So you've got that whole year to put the work into it. It's really awesome. It's exciting.
Then our final 3 are engaging families, and I'll just say that with a lot of the schools use tools like counseling, social media, marketing communication efforts, family nights, various, all, Lord knows, every night of the week, there's something going on for families, it seems like, in this district. So I will just, at this point, in order to final thoughts, final questions on anything we've talked about in the last hour, engaging families and working all the way back to the very beginning.
I got one on the portrait of a graduate. How do you assess that?
That's a great question, and that's what we're trying to get.
Actually, so that's one of assessing it. So our standards-based learning and reporting task force is working towards that. That's kind of, we had an aha moment where it was like a portrait of a graduate award. And it's not recognition in a portrait of a graduate. It's all of these things and how do they all tie in to the portrait of a graduate. So we're working on that and looking at our award system and how to acknowledge it. We just finished a document recently that TLA helped us establish. It's those look fors. So every site was able to look for, what is this certain attribute of a graduate? What does it look like in your classroom? And so then we'll have a common district look for reference tools so we know what we're looking for. So then we can reinforce those things with our students. So it's a work in progress. But it is all coming together.
And just to be clear, the task force she's referring to is in its 3rd year. And Mimi and Meg Padilla have been the facilitators of that, and it's got representation teachers from all 5 sites working on standards-based and like I said, for 3 years.
So Steve invited me in to be portrait of a graduate for, I think, the high school way back in the summer.
Right.
So I did a little reading. But there was one high school that portrait of a graduate where it was public speaking, lifelong learner, discipline, resilience. And so the seniors, before they left that school, they had to get in front of a panel and they had to give a presentation, speaking. They had to dress professionally, and they hit the 6 traits or whatever they had for that portrait. So say, for instance, at your school, you know, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are leaving your school, this student needs to attain, you know, an assessment that, okay, maybe it's a classroom assessment, and did you hit those skills? And you are now certified to move on to, you know, But when they left that school in my readings that they were ready to tackle the world because they proved that they had that portrait, that the community was involved in developing, the faculty and the students were involved. So that's just something I'll throw out there, but that's one that I had with the assessment.
Our learner attributes on our report cards are tied to our portrait of a graduate, so that is as one way we assess or that we give feedback in regards to that, but it is absolutely still a work in progress of
Yeah.
finding what it looks like and
We're working with Synergy to figure out how to document when a student has demonstrated mastery of. How do you demonstrate mastery of grit, right, or resilience, things like that. So how can, if Synergy is our database for student achievement, how can we use that resource? Its full potential.
And my last question, or not question, just observation, I was looking at the Azella. And there's definitely a downward trend. And I always say that that's our sort of our subgroup that is always struggling, and I always worry about them as far as moving on to college, trade schools, military, etc., having the skills necessary. And just, food for thought, keep an eye on that data and interventions, definitely focus on those identify, because they are identifiable.
Something that we did notice, and it was across the district, is that these kids have been in an SEI class for a long time, and why is that still happening? And so we met with the team, so a study team, and some of them were determined that they needed intervention like for resource classes, so they could get those skills and not just the SEI skills that they're needing, because it could be one level that's really pushing them down. And so we did a lot of different, I know everybody did, because I know my site had quite a few of them, but trying to assess what is the best route and for them. Do they need more of that assistance, specialized assistance in reading and math, or is it that it's for reading, particularly math and social studies, or is it more of a language barrier? And so we've been able to pinpoint because of that data of the trends. So it is really great that you mentioned that, but definitely an eye to.
Yeah, and I know on the Zella, I think it's reading, writing, speaking, correct?
Speaking and listening.
Listening.
Comprehension.
And there's great strategies to address specific portion of that. And as a teacher, a lot of times I find a strategy to address that. When you can identify, which ones are the lowest. You can't implement all strategies, but definitely keep in mind that subgroup and maybe changing teaching styles to address those issues.
We still rate PSYOP, which is, obviously geared toward that. But the other thing I would say that the assessment has changed, and Megan can talk about some of that. And then also there are some things that we're finding that I know Ms. Vasquez can verify, is that some kids don't want to leave the program, so they sabotage themselves to know that they're going to stay in that ELL class so that they can get that support in their other classes. So those are some other things that we have to address. And we're also seeing kids that are coming here later. So they're coming later, and then there also have kids in the early groups that don't speak Spanish, but still can't pass the test. So they're considered ELL students, but they can't pass the Azella test, even though they don't speak Spanish, which is like, how is that possible? It's because they can't speak themselves to meet the English portion of it, or listening, or whatever it may be, even though they don't speak Spanish. But their parent put that they speak Spanish at home. So those are some things that are also that we're finding with the new assessment that are making it different, because the old assessment, we knew how to address all those things, and that's a group that I agree is one of our, obviously it's our biggest group, subgroup.
And it's been a perfect job for us to tell you, and we've gone to the State Department. Part of our being above the state average for efficiency and so we all noticed the change we were talking about, and we all, I like what you said about it.
And that's what I'm saying, with all these things, we're finding what are the root cause. And there's all these different things that we like never saw before. What is the root cause that's causing that? Is it just a change in the assessment? Or is it something we're doing with our instruction or how? Because that has to run back to. other way.
I know as a teacher, when I was looking over the data, one of them was the speaking portion of it. And I just picked a stride, the think, write, pair, share. You know, allows them a little bit of time to think about it, write about it, you know, and then and just me changing my teaching style to address that specific, not overall general. Made a difference, so.
Yeah, it does. So, thank you.
Yep.
Well, I want to commend CTE, all the people that worked so hard in CTE because they really helped raise the scores. High school on the big push to invest in CTE. It seems to really be paying off and we had a hell of a good score on a positive note. It was 18 plus and wasn't it? That was really something else and keep up the good work on that. And I just wanted to suggest that we keep working too on secondary enrollment and the military service and prior years, because I think we get bonus points for that.
Hector, can you speak to that?
We do. For military service, we do get bonus.
So I just suggest that we keep pushing on that because we could score some nice bonus points on that if we keep. So it's a suggestion.
You're welcome.
Steve, you do a great job like always.
Yeah, good job, everybody. Yep.
I'm in guard. I was thinking.
I thought.
They were asking what. Oh, good.
I think there are no more questions at that end of the table.
But yeah, no, certainly, it's always good to have this. I mean, we can obviously chat more about this because there's other subgroups that we certainly want to hit for all you principals. Thank you very much. Gotta keep it short and simple to the point. You know, we all can be long-winded at times. You know, hopefully we don't get to that, but we'll get to the points. That's what we're trying to do, just simplify it. You did a great job. Thank you.
And I want to thank the board for allowing us to do this type of discussion. Because in the past, you know, it was just here's the information and not really have a true study session. And so shifting that to a study session where we actually interact and have some feedback and discuss, disagree, agree, and those type of things are important for us to grow as a district. So I appreciate the board.
And be ready. We're gonna have more. We already chatted about that, Mr. Rudy, didn't we? There is more, certainly.
I had a good, we all appreciate this.
And I know this is all state assessments. You ever want to share school assessments that you're doing in-house with us? Because that's where the true growth is. You know, a lot of times this is just, you know, you got to take it, the kids have to take it, but the true growth is within the classroom. And if you ever want to share a little bit of other data with this, show successes, feel free.
And just one final comment, I'll say that, you know, one of the things that we talked about is looking beyond the assessments as well. The high school is going to have their A+ visit, which we already announced which is a very comprehensive look at your entire site, not only academically, but it looks at your culture, looks at the community engagement from an outside group. So you get an outside group that comes and evaluates you. And I know it's very rigorous to do. So I commend the high school on taking that opportunity to go through it. I know as a principal, when I went through it, it was, I mean, it is very, very in-depth. And even if you don't achieve the A+, knowing the feedback of what you can improve at the school just in general. And so that, I just wanted to, you know, follow your comment there that there is much more than just a test score. So, thank you. Mr. Kramer, you can adjourn us from here, or if you want to go up and hammer it out.
Hammer it out.
Yeah, that was it. I couldn't remember it. Thank you for remembering. What the other topic was. It's surveys. Surveys. Send it out to the board. Because some of us contributed, correct? To that survey? 3 people did. So the other board members will be the topic for the next one. All right, with that said, we are at the study session. We are to governing board meeting evaluation, Mr. Ramirez.
Good. Like the superintendent said, we hashed out some stuff and we don't always see eye to eye, but we got a lot done. It's good to have these study sessions, I think. They did a very good job, President. And also for agreeing to these study sessions because we get a lot done. Yeah, sometimes we talk about stuff and it seems like it's long-winded, as you mentioned, but we get things done, and I mean, it's for the sake of the kids. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, we have motion to adjourn this meeting with the study session included. Wait a second. Second there. All right, all in favor, please, Mark, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, those are abstained.
Abstain.
All right. And the time is 6:50 p.m.
Kept it under 2 hours.